Hey everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar on VA loan assumptions. And we like to say, is it the smart move or a costly mistake? Spoiler alert, it can be both sometimes, and we'll hit on kind of why. So let's get in real quick as folks are loading in. We'll hit over the basics of just who we are and whatnot and get right on into it. So we're WeVet, if you don't know about us, ultimately. We're a company that helps military families find and finance their next home. And we do that through two separate companies. Number one, WeVet Home Loans. That's what I happen to run. And that's where we work with VA loans and helping military families in just about every state there's a major military installation use their VA loan home benefits. And we have WeVet Realty. That's our other company, sister company, that's run by a couple wonderful folks as well, that helps connect military-focused families with military-focused real estate agents. Now you're getting agents that understand the lifestyle, what it's like, and working with VA loans as well in all states within the country. Background there, though, I guess myself, they want to say, I do a lot of VA loans. That's all this slide says. So ultimately been doing real estate and mortgage now for over a decade. The shift was from real estate sales to mortgage, and it's actually been a wonderful experience getting to work for clients. We continue to help them move around the country, specifically, primarily, I should say, with VA loans. We'll do conventional loans as well, FHA too, but the majority, 90% VA loans, and really enjoy doing so. Now, let's get into it. VA loan assumptions is what you're here for. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments, and we'll make sure we answer those either now or we'll answer them later on after if they happen to come down later. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk about what is an assumable loan, who qualifies, the assumption process, what we call the assumption gap is, and then lastly, 3 key takeaways if you miss everything to just remember about VA loan assumptions. And here's the deal. These VA loan assumptions have become big over the last couple of years. Why? Well, in the past, VA loan assumptions made no sense because the unique thing is, in VA loan assumptions we'll talk about, you can assume a loan. Well, if you're assuming a higher rate, doesn't make a lot of sense. Assuming a lower rate makes a lot of sense. What have mortgage rates done over the past few years? They went from really low to really high. So if you had an old rate, someone could assume that lower rate, the old lower rate, at the new higher rates. They could swap them out, which makes a big difference. Starting to see them balance out a little bit now because rates have been higher for longer. But anyways, let's get into it. So, assumption 101. What is a VA loan assumption as a whole? Well, the basics of an assumption is when a willing buyer takes over and becomes responsible for the existing loan of a willing home seller. So the key there is you have two people that want to do it. You can't just take someone's loan and assume it. They have to be willing to let you assume their current loan. That's a key distinction of an assumption. Because just because someone's selling their home and they happen to have a low interest rate, say VA loan, and they're moving to a new place, you can't just take it. They have to be willing to do so. Now, who qualifies ultimately? This will touch on the big thing for sellers, who qualifies on doing assumptions, meaning like if I'm a seller, hey, I want to offer an assumption to people, who can do that? All the government loan programs can. Of a VA loan, that's a big one that we're obviously touching on. That's a key part of this subject. FHA loans and USDA loans. Now, VA loans have some nuances that we're going to be talking on here, but they're the main loan assumption that we're discussing for this whole presentation. Now, for buyers, who can assume a VA loan? Almost all assumable loans require the buyer to qualify at the same standard as the original borrower. So the deal is, sometimes folks have said, Evan, I want to try to go assume that loan because I can't qualify for a normal loan today. Well, if you can't qualify for a regular VA loan today, there's a good chance you might not qualify for that assumable VA loan. Why? Because you still have to go through the process. Just because you can't qualify for a loan doesn't mean you can all of a sudden go get an assumption. You're still going to have to go through that underwriting process with the seller's servicer, and they're going to underwrite you based on the time frame of when the seller purchased the property. So just don't think that, oh man, I can't qualify for a traditional mortgage. Now all of a sudden I guess I got to look for assumptions. Assumptions, you still got to make sure you qualify as well. We'll actually have a lot of folks that might come and get qualified with us to know what they can do, and then they'll find a home that they can assume, because if you're qualified with us today, at today's standards, you're typically going to qualify as well for an assumption if you happen to find one, which again, my viewpoint on assumptions, you might hear a lot of lending institutions say assumptions are terrible, not good, bad. Well, obviously, because then no one's doing new loans or no one's getting paid. Personally, assumptions can be fantastic. If you can find a loan that's reasonable for how much you have to bring, or what we'll talk about the assumption gap here in a second, and it's 2.5%, 3%, 4%, hey, take it all day long. If rates are up at 5, 6, 7, fantastic. Do it if you can do it and make it through some of the hurdles that we're going to talk about here. But point is, as a buyer, you still have to qualify. Now, as well, it has to be for an owner-occupied property. You can't just assume it and it be a rental, for example. It has to meet that standard. If you notice, all those government loan programs are all for primary residences, meaning you have to live there. So let's talk about who qualifies. So sellers, especially on VA loans, if you're right now watching and you're a seller debating on letting your loan go up for assumption, beware. So VA loans, that's funny. VA loans can be assumed by veterans and non-veterans. However, one big thing is you want to make sure there's something called a substitution of entitlement for your VA loan eligibility. Now, that's where all of a sudden now, if you're offering your home up for an assumption and a non-veteran wants to buy it, civilian that has no VA certificate of eligibility or anything, then you risk giving up your VA entitlement for potentially ever, as long as they hold that loan. So most often we don't see VA sellers doing assumables to non-veteran buyers. But if you happen to get a veteran buyer that can assume it, you can do something called substitution of entitlement. And you want to make sure if you're doing an assumption with a VA, with another VA buyer, you want to make sure, hey, that substitution entitlement, that's getting done, right? Hey, is that done? And when you're getting ready to close, you want to make sure VA, hey, we're restoring my entitlement. I'm good to go. My entitlement's all good and restored. Yeah? Okay, fantastic. Because if you don't, your entitlement can be tied up in that loan, and it can be at the mercy of whatever that new owner does with it. Number one, it limits you potentially from getting a VA loan in the future. But number two, it could actually it could eliminate the possibility if they miss their payments, etc., that can harm your VA eligibility. So it's important to make sure that substitution of entitlement is done if it's with another military buyer. So the civilian are very limited in what you can do, and that's why we just don't see that very often. So now that's who qualifies for doing a VA loan assumption. Now let's talk briefly on the process here. Broke it down to 3 simple steps. One, you want to confirm that the seller has an assumable loan. Now, you don't just want to assume that with the seller. You want to make sure you assume that with the seller's servicer. So like we do VA loans, and we do them all day long. We have our servicing department or group. If it's sold to someone else, they'll take care of it all and everything, but they're servicers. So the person that's servicing the loan is the one that counts when you're trying to do an assumable. So like if we did your loan, we might not be servicing it immediately. So you got to work with the servicer. Heck, even if it was our group servicing it in some way, you're not necessarily working with me, you're working with servicing to make sure that that you can do the assumption. So it's important to know from if you're a buyer looking at a seller's place that, hey, that loan is assumable. So you want to actually get a response directly from the servicer that yes, we're good to make this assumption. Now, deal is on a VA loan, it's part of the loan. So if a servicer says no for some reason, know that there's very few reasons they can actually deny a VA loan assumption. So push on it if you get told no. There's some random circumstances that can happen, but you want to push on it if so, because they're supposed to do so. It's part of the VA loan. Now, you want to confirm that. Number 2, execute assumable purchase contract. That could just be a regular purchase contract, but having an addendum that involves terms for the assumable, like how soon you have to have the approval done and everything set up. Because number 3 is you need to receive the servicer assumption approval. And that process can take a while. Hence why at the end we say expect 60 to 120 plus days. Recently we've heard of a few that just closed at about the 6-month mark. Now more have been done, so I would say we're consistently maybe seeing in that probably 90-day-ish mark, give or take. Just know that it can take longer to have these done. Why is that, Evan? Well, because you're dealing directly with a servicer, and servicers aren't typically built to originate loans, so they're not wanting to go through all the underwriting and everything. On top of that, they don't really get paid, so there's not a lot of incentive. Just fun fact to know for it. So there's not a whole lot of incentive always there. So you want to stay on top of servicers when you're going through that assumption process. But this is number 1 of 2 of the big things that usually kill assumptions, and that's the fact that it can take a long time. If you're PCSing in the military location, you got to move into somewhere within 30 days. And this assumption, they're projecting 3-4 months. That might make it all tough to do, period. Now, if the deal's really sweet, you just got to balance the benefits, but know that it can take some time to get an assumption done. So you want to start preparing for that sooner than later if you're going to do it. Again, that's why we have folks that will get them pre-approved. We know they're looking for assumptions. Find an assumption, awesome. Something doesn't work out, hey, we at least got you ready pre-approved for a regular home. That's one of the good strategies to take. Now, next, let's talk about I would say timeline can ward people away for sure, especially if it's late in the game, but this is usually the deal that kills most assumptions. And it's what we like to call the assumption gap. So the buyer is able to take over the existing loan. However, they need to make up the difference from the sales price. So a lot of homes, for example, in 2020, 2021 that sold at those super low interest rates in the 2s and 3s, they sold for a lot less than what they're selling for today. So if all of a sudden they had, let's say, bought the home for $300,000 and maybe paid the mortgage down to like 280 or something like that, and now they're wanting to sell the home for, it wouldn't be crazy to hear someone try to sell it for 400 or 500,000 4 or 5 years later, which nuts because of the appreciation we've had. Now all of a sudden that difference between the sales price and the loan balance that's remaining is what's called the assumption gap, and you as a buyer have to come up with that difference. So if the loan balance is $280,000 at a 3% rate, but the sales price is going to all of a sudden be, let's say, $500,000, you need to bring that $220,000 difference to closing. How can you get that? There have been some attempts to try to jump in there and do extra mortgages, seconds, that kind of stuff. What we typically see folks do is they'll either have the cash, make sure you have the cash to do it. That's obviously a great idea, number one. It's like just putting a big down payment down. We've seen folks that'll take out loans on other paid off property or cars and stuff to do so. Just know that that can impact that approval process because they got to take into account any new debts as well. Taking from retirement accounts in ways, because that can be a little less of a limiting factor. We'll see folks do that because, again, if you can assume a super low rate, it just might make sense, but you got to run the numbers. Oftentimes that's where a deal will die. Now we sometimes see though, hey, the loan is $380,000 and the sales price is $420,000. Hot dog, that's not too bad. That's like you're bringing a 10% down payment to get a super low interest rate. Fantastic, do it. Make sure you can try to get it all day long. And so we've seen some of those as well. But keep in mind the assumption gap is something that you're going to have to account for if you're trying to take over that new assumption. Now, let's talk about these key takeaways, right? These VA loan assumptions, they're simple, yet they're not. I'd say the big one is, the big three are confirm, make sure that the seller's servicer will do the VA loan assumption. So, because remember, even if the seller goes, oh, I have a VA loan, it's assumable, we're good, let's do it. Hey, have you talked with your servicer? Have you let them know you're looking to do this assumption? That way you have a point of contact. Can you get from them an idea of the time frame? A lot of the servicers will sometimes give you a time frame of what they're expecting to do it in. Oh, hey, we're getting these done on a 60-day rolling table or 90 or whatever it is. So then you can at least know expectations. So you want to confirm. Then you want to prepare. And remember, you want to prepare to qualify for the loan still. Just because it's an assumption doesn't mean you don't have to qualify. Just because it's an assumption, you still have to qualify. We'll say it that way. You're just going to work with that servicer to get it done and be ready again for some unique back and forth. It might not be as pleasurable as if you were working with us on a purchase. If you're watching and working with us on a purchase, I hope you always had a good time. Hopefully that's why you actually showed up to watch the video for its sake, let's say. But no, for an assumption, it's just usually it can be a little bit tougher. But again, can totally be worth it if the reward in the end is just, saving a couple $100 on your mortgage. It can totally be worth it. Then time. Give yourself time. And then for buyer's sake especially, make sure that you go ahead and make sure you take into account that assumption clause and make sure you have deadlines in for your contract. So ideally, if you're a buyer, you want to make sure that assumption clause deadline is a lot further out than closer in. If you're a seller, you might want to make sure that assumption clause time frame is shorter, so you try to push things to get done than not. But know that you want to make sure you have an assumption clause within your contract in some way, and you just want to make sure though that you give yourself time overall. So, if there are any questions and answers, please drop them in down below. I'm going to be looking at Matt to see if there's anything for it. Fantastic. Looks like we're ready to go because we answer everything as we talk through it. If you're watching this a future recording, feel free to throw something in the comments as well. Or here's the next steps for it. You can reach out to me. That is our personal cell for me, my personal work cell. Feel free to reach out. You can email as well. You can go to wevet.com to get started on a mortgage if you'd like. As we talked about it, a lot of folks for assumptions will get pre-approved and say, hey, Evan, we're looking for assumptions, and we want to make sure we have a backup plan. We deal with that often. Don't feel afraid to tell us. We're happy to do that for you. If you need a real estate agent, sister company Wevet Realty can get you set up. But then resources. We just have a lot of resources. You go to wevet.com/education, and you're going to see a lot of videos like this on assumptions, on VA loan crash course, the home buying process, making the decision when you PCS to buy or rent. When you go to sell, should I sell it or should I rent it out? Going through those analysis and those things. Military to civilian life transition. We have a whole mini course on that. Put a lot of information out there, again, for military families, helping folks find and finance their next home. My name's Evan Kaufman. Thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.